What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Ruben and Jessie podcast. As always, I am Jessie.
And I'm Ruben.
And today we are shooting the motherfucking shit. We've got some really interesting things to talk about, especially once you see the title of this podcast.
Well, Jesse already has a title in mind. He hasn't told me.
I already have a title in mind.
Gotta get my notebook and whatnot.
Ruben is eating right now because he has no respect.
Love y'all. I'll put myself on mute just for y'all.
No, it's all right. But I figured we were chatting before we pressed record, and I figured it might just be nice to update you guys on some of the nutrition shifts that have been going on, because why the fuck not?
We haven't talked about it in a while.
Yeah, we really haven't. Some of you guys might know this. I think I've probably mentioned this before on the show, but the majority of my diet that was going on for last several months. Some of you guys know that I recently shifted out of a relationship, so I moved, and I think pretty much since I moved out of that relationship, I've been doing just meat and potatoes. Like, that has literally been my diet, with like olive oil as like what I would use that for, like if I'm cooking salmon, or if I'm baking the potatoes. But that was majority of the main portions of my food was that. And then, like, if I was going out or wanted a snack, I'd go get a snack. But that was the center of my diet, was meat and potatoes. And for a long time I wanted to experiment with the carnivore diet. Yeah, I wanted to experiment with it, but I was like, I don't know how I'd feel, because the amount of training I do, even though like a lot of research has shown that carnivore is really, really the true base of our diet. Like, did I share with you that podcast with Paul Saladino and Mickey? What's his name? Let me look this up real quick. I think his name is Mickey Dore. One sec. Let me not butcher.
You didn't, but I have read the carnivore diet.
Yeah.
And in there, he does reference a lot of not only studies, but like, the theory on like how meat helped us have the brains that we have today.
Yeah.
By like through evolution.
Yeah. Well, there was this podcast that really took it over the edge for me, that I listened to last weekend. It's called Did We Evolve as Carnivores, with Mickey Bendor on the Fundamental Health podcast with Paul Saladino.
We'll link below, folks.
With the link below. For those of you who don't know, Paul Saladino is like leading the charge in many ways for the carnivore diet. He's written the book, The Carnivore Code, and just he has his own desiccated organ supplement company. Like, this is his whole universe, is this. Oh, I don't know if you've ever seen this. There's this interview. It's so crazy to me. There's this interview where and if we find it, we'll put it in the show notes. We need, like, when we're back and doing these live in person, we're gonna need to get someone like Joe Rogan has, just like put shit up on the screen.
Put shit up on the screen, right?
There's this one interview where Paul Saladino, this is like a TV interview. Like, Saladino's in a fucking suit and tie. It's hilarious. Like, he looks so funny, but like dressed like that.
He always has his shirt off.
In this, yeah, exactly. So he's in this crowd. It's like a talk show, and I think it's called like The Four Doctors, or Funny Enough, I think that's what it's called.
I watched a few scenes of this.
You know what I'm talking about? Where they just like berate him.
They berate him for the meat diet. They didn't even let him speak.
Yeah, they didn't even let him speak. But what was so crazy about watching this was like the way these hosts acted about it. It was as if it was like he was preaching like witchcraft to the church. You know what I mean? Like, that was their reaction. It was like, we'll burn you at the stake for thinking this way. Like, they were losing their minds. They're like, you're a biologist. How could you know anything? I was like, what? I was like, what are you talking about? Meanwhile, one of the women who was doing this were clearly out of shape. And the other, like another woman was like having a mental breakdown trying to explain her point. And then this other guy was like acting like a child. It's like, what do you mean you're just gonna eat all meat? What do you mean? I'm like, what is happening? Like, how is this a legitimate conversation?
And it sucks because it's like I remember reading this in like a marketing book about the white coat, like how it symbolizes so many things for humanity.
Yeah.
And how the internet has kind of like made it where it's just like we don't trust doctors, and there's like, okay, great, fine, we don't trust doctors, but it's like there are doctors out there doing the great work that are like, I was listening to a podcast the other day, he was talking about you have to find a doctor with the 4 C's, and it's like curiosity. I'm gonna butcher it. It's like, but I know one of them was like curiosity. Like basically a doctor, you'll tell them like, hey, this is something that I've tried, I heard about this. They won't tell you like, no, that's not wrong because of their medical background. Instead, they'll be like, huh, that's interesting. Maybe I should also do the research. Let me know how that works for you. And let me know when you come back to get your checkup on how you're doing. We'll take blood tests, we'll do this. That's a doctor you want to find, not a doctor that's going to tell you like, oh, like this is wrong, like you shouldn't do this because high fat diet is really bad for you, the heart, blah blah blah. Meanwhile, the real culprit is sugar. It's like,
it was nuts.
Right.
But it was cool to see Saladino, like, and Saladino is funny because he's just like, he does this thing with his face where he just looks at you like, yo, you stupid motherfucker.
Right.
Like he wasn't saying that, but he was just looking at them like, how can you be communicating like this with me? Like it was just bananas. So I give him props for even like trying. And then you see like the freaking peanut gallery, right? Everyone in the audience is just like, anytime these
but those are the producers doing that, like saying they have a sign that says clap. And I've been on sets. Have you been on sets?
Oh, really? No, I've never been on a set.
I've been on a set. Remember when MTV had Yo Mama?
No way. You were on a Yo Mama set?
I was on the outskirts. Yeah, they did one in Brooklyn underneath the bridge, and I had a friend who like had a connect and was like, hey, you want to make like 50 quick bucks? And I was like, yeah. So we went, and they do that. Like the producer will have a sign behind the cameras. Obviously, you can't see this if you're watching it. They have a sign and it says like to clap, to cheer, like do this, do that. Everything is it's not like natural, bro. This is why I love podcasts, for instance. This is why I love Joe Rogan and all these things, because it's not edited. It's straight through. When you're looking at something that's super heavily edited, they get to control the narrative. So it's kind of funny that I had that experience or one time that does happen in the background. So
I mean, that shit was just, it was a wild sight. It really was a wild sight, because I was like, this guy's just talking, like he's not even but anyway, back to the podcast. So here are a few things that I want, and I've like, when it's a good podcast, when you don't have to like write anything down and you just remember shit because it's just so mind-blowing.
Right.
So one of the biggest things that blew my mind listening to this podcast was the episode is all about this guy Mickey Bendor, who's an archaeologist, and he writes this paper on like 10 points as to why we evolved as carnivores and even potentially hyper carnivores. And a little asterisk here, I may be butchering some things, so go listen to the episode and you'll know, like you'll hear the exact version of it. So don't kill me if you do and I said something that was slightly off kilter. But I 80 to 97% of the way there on everything I'm talking about here. At least the gist of it. I'm not a fucking doctor. Just, know that.
Yeah, exactly. But we are holistic health coaches, so
we are holistic health coaches.
So
if you're looking for some support, hit us the fuck up.
Yeah. Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. So the paper was on these 10 points as to why we evolved as carnivores and even potentially hyper carnivores.
What's a hyper carnivore, Jesse?
So the way he explained it was like, uh, he was sharing how most mammals are omnivores, right? And that we are omnivores. There's no debating that we are omnivores. His point was, though, that like you could be an omnivore, but that doesn't mean that you're equally balanced in what you ate or what you were designed to eat, right? Plant food versus animal food, right? There are ratios. He's like, there are monkeys that eat
Each
other
other.
monkeys. Yeah, there are monkeys that eat other monkeys or eat animal food, even though most of their diet is made up of, like, most of the diet can be made up of plant food. So it's more trying to understand, well, okay, if that's true, what is the ratio for humans? And he said that it's likely that we were hyper carnivores, meaning that like the much greater majority ratio was towards animal-based food versus foraging and plant-based food. And so here's some of the points that really blew my mind. Like, one that I remember he mentioned, that, so you know the paleo diet, right?
Yeah.
So the paleo diet
You froze for a minute, bro. You said the paleo diet, and you said this, and then you froze, and then you came back.
Okay, so the paleo diet. Am I back?
Yes.
Okay. So the the paleo diet, you know, if you're listening to this, you probably know what it is. If you don't, it's just like what they would reference as like what our ancestors ate, right? This is the most agreed upon diet that is said to be for hunters and gatherers. This is how we ate, and it was, you know, like mainly just like no grains, root vegetables, meat, nuts, seeds, and let me look up what the actual,
well, it's closer to a whole foods like diet. It's just, you know, like you ate, if it came from the ground or it had legs, you ate it. You know,
right, exactly. So
or swam, you ate it.
Right. So it says like lean meats, fish, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. And that was like, that's the makeup of the makeup of the paleo diet. And they call it paleo because Paleolithic age, you know, hunters and gatherers, that's the assumption of how we ate at the time. Mickey Bendor writes in this paper that the people who designed the paleo diet, right, the people who came up with the research around the paleo diet, it was said that they researched these, you know, these ancient civilizations, these ancient ways of living, and through that found that this is how they ate, right? But that's actually not the entire truth, because what they did is they did study hunter-gatherer tribes, but they studied modern hunter-gatherer tribes. They studied the ones that are around today, the versions that exist right now, where not thousands of years ago when we evolved to eat a certain way. And a lot of these places where hunter-gatherer tribes exist, a lot of those places are have either been infiltrated by Western culture, or have degenerated and their sources are limited. Many of these tribes like are not able to access large game like they did thousands of years ago. And so these people who came up with this were basing it off of the ones that exist now. So it's not based off of any real ancient civilization. It's based off of modern civilizations that live in poor environments. So that just like that blew me away, bro. That blew me the fuck. Yeah, Ruben shaking his head.
It's funny because like I just finished this book called Of Wolves and Men. It was written in the 80s by a gentleman called Barry Lopez. And it literally is all about humanity, like humans and wolves, and why we kind of evolved together, and the discrepancies between like what we understand as the wolf due to the historical evidence. Like you think of the stories of big bad wolves, and this guy I respect him so much because not only did he look at like, okay, these are the people that believe wolves shouldn't exist, right? Where's that come from? So he like studied under these wolf hunters from back in the day. You know, a lot of places right now you can't hunt wolves because a lot of their species are endangered, for instance. So he studied and he asked these people questions and interviewed them. There was a whole chapter on the like, why do we kill wolves? Like, what is the fascination? And these hunters, for some reason, hate wolves, like this deep hate. And then you have the other side, which he actually went to these tribes. Think of the Eskimos, like all these hunter-based tribes in different parts of the country. You know, there's some in Canada. Obviously, the Eskimos are in the north, like very high up north. And what he said was that the wolf is like kind of like your competition, and they don't consider humans as top of the pyramid. We are just a part of the entirety of the ecosystem, right? So when they go and hunt, they literally will come across wolves who are trying to hunt the same animal as them, and pretty much they're just with nature, just like how nature actually does, right? And they use guns, but they see the wolf as like a spiritual deity that actually has blessings, and that they live alongside these wolves, right? Like they don't kill them. They don't believe in that unless they absolutely have to, like a wolf is attacking them or whatever the case may be. That does happen, but they're like, we don't go out there and hunt wolves, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, I say that to say, like, one, there are still tribes out there that are doing what our ancestors did, right? Even in this day and age, even though they use modernized weapons like guns. I know he was talking about in the book that some of them do use guns versus like a bow and arrow and spears and whatnot. There's literally a tribe, and I forget the name, it's in the book, that hunt like wolves, which is crazy. They literally took how wolves hunt. They learned from the wolf.
Wow.
And they took it upon themselves. They still use spears. And what they'll do, and Barry Lopez, the author, said he followed them on a hunt once. The leader of the pack, right, just like wolves, would go in, and once they know and they can see that there's a buffalo or something, the rest of the group, without, they don't even talk. They don't need to talk. They just make like hand signals and move their heads. They ended up going outside of the parameter of this wildebeest and covered ground. You had a part of them that scared the buffalo to run a certain way, and the other ones were waiting in like this hilltop thing with their spears up. So when it went over, they would just stab it.
Oh wow.
And then the main leader will come and do the finishing blow. This is exactly how wolves hunt, bro.
Wow.
I was reading that part, I was like blown away. I was like, fuck, like this is so cool, you know? Like the fact that these are people that live close to nature, the way we were supposed to live, because you know, the way we are now, like good intentions it comes from, based on like my reading of The Wizard and the Prophet and like crops and all this stuff and agriculture, came with good intentions, but we did not look ahead enough to see like the damage that's being done to the earth versus these tribes that are living with the earth.
Yeah. That's actually something that they talk about in the podcast too, that really like kind of blew me away. Was they talked about how that there were these times where, and this happened over like centuries, where there would be these Western travelers that would go see these tribes that have lived this way. And for example, like the Hadza tribe, I believe they're in Costa Rica or Africa, one of those.
I think they're in Western Africa, if I'm not mistaken.
Western Africa, yes. I know they talk about I know Paul is out visiting a tribe in Costa Rica right now, but let's Google this shit.
Let's Google it. Yeah, he talked about the Hadza a lot in his book as well.
Yeah.
They're in northern Tanzania.
Now I have to know where Tanzania is. Tanzania.
But these people live
in East Africa.
East Africa.
Yeah.
Oh, I was wrong.
Tanzania. So he talked about how there would be these Westerners who would come over to these tribes. They would see how they live, and they would think that they're living barbarically. They think that they were living poorly because they didn't have advanced technology. You know what I mean? They didn't have like fancy clothes. They didn't have soft couches, all this shit, whatever, right? And this guy from the UK, he literally did this thing where he took like a group of these people, right, and brought them over to the UK. They were like knighted by the Queen. They were like treated like as royalty, all this stuff. These fuckers escaped. Like they legitimately escaped. They
Oh my
got on a boat
God.
and went back. And they're like, why do we need any of this? Why would we want any of this? And there were also there was something he said in the podcast that was so telling. Actually, I actually don't think this was, I'm mixing episodes. What I'm talking about right now is not the Mickey Bendor. It's the one with your boy, with Chris Ryan. Are we civilized to death?
Yes.
He did there's an episode with Paul Saladino, like 2 episodes before the one we were just referencing with Chris Ryan, about his book Civilized to Death. And they were talking about like living this way. And another thing he references is, I think you read Civilized to Death, right?
No, I didn't actually. It's
Oh,
on my
you haven't?
list. Not yet.
Oh, we should read it. We
should
should
read it
read
together
it.
and talk about it on
Yeah.
the podcast. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'd be down. I'll pick that shit up today probably. And so he references one of the things in his book, which is how so that was one thing. But then another thing was that there were a lot of, like, Harvard, I think, has done this, or Stanford, one of these like top schools, and they would do these multiple, they used to do these things where they would take a group of people from the West and send them over to live with these tribes. And they would do kind of like a foreign exchange, right? Some
Right.
people from the tribes would come here and they would go there. And every time, without a doubt, the people who came to Western culture wanted to go the fuck back. And the people who went over there wanted to stay. And that's why they canceled the program. They canceled the program because these kids did not want to go back to their schools. Yeah, they didn't want to go back to Harvard or whatever because they fell in love with this way of living.
Freedom, man.
And freedom. And he's like, and they started comparing it to a zoo, right? Like how we've chosen to live, like we live in a zoo essentially, right? Like,
right.
we're held in captivity. We're not living in our natural means, and we're told, right, the same way these animals are technically told, we're told that it's for our own good. Like, we don't have to suffer, right? We don't have to suffer in nature. We don't have to
killed
get
by a
eaten
panther.
Exactly, right? We can live by the comforts that we have in front of us today. And so we stay in our cage, and that's literally like what we as a society have chosen to do. Now he also references is like, you can choose, like, there are levels to the quality of zoos. Like, he's like, I've been to some dope zoos before where, like, that's a great place to live. And so it's like, if we're going to choose to live in a zoo, that could be fine, as long as we are aware of it and choosing consciously how we want our zoo to be designed.
Right.
But like, as of right now, like, when I look out my window, there's nothing outside of my window that looks like where my DNA comes from.
Same.
Except these like single trees on the block.
I have some bushes and like a tree, some grass in front of the apartment complex, but that's it.
Yeah. And so that was just to bounce off what you're talking about, the wolves, like that blew my mind as well.
It's beautiful. Have you read something that came up based on your speaking? Have you read Brave New World by Aldous Huxley?
No, I read his other book, Island, but I have not read Brave New World.
Bro, basically what you're saying was that, like, you have your zoo, civilization,
Mm-hmm.
everyone lives, they have a drug called Soma that keeps you happy all the time, and everyone
Mm-hmm.
takes it. And the main character begins to like kind of stop taking it, starts questioning society. I forget exactly how it happens, but I know he ends up outside of this bubble, which is actually, I think in the book, it's explained as they live in like a high-tech bubble, and ends up in like this uncivilized, right? This tribal society that exists outside where, people didn't want to take it. this soma thing, and they were like sent out, and they basically live like tribes, like the tribes you were
Yeah.
just talking about like, and they were like, we don't want to go back in there because it's all a lie. It's like,
Yeah.
it's all just like for show. Like
Yeah.
everyone just wants to be happy. They're not willing to experience the whole um what's the word,
Spectrum.
spectrum of the emotions.
Hmm.
And the main character meets another guy who's called the Wild Man, funny enough, like Iron John,
Iron John.
and brings the Wild Man back, and like this whole
Yeah.
thing because have almost a war happens. Like
Oh, that's so cool.
it's a
That's so cool
really,
that he
it's a really,
referenced that.
yeah, he like, I don't know if he called it the Wild Man, but basically it was a dude that was like very like strong and like, but wild. Like he didn't,
Yeah.
he was like a
Yeah.
fighter. No one fights in this new world because
Yeah.
everyone's on this drug soma
Hmm.
that just makes you everything
Yeah.
peaceful and happy all the time.
Yeah.
But
I wonder if he did that. I would assume he did that intentionally, that he
oh yeah,
probably knew of the Iron John myth and put that character in there, because that's like exactly how that would go down.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, and the fact that again, we're talking about books. Like I'm talking about a book from 1980 something, Brave New
Yeah.
World, was I think written in the 1930s. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy how like you start reading this and you're just like, oh, this is like this is kind of too true. You know what I'm saying? Like it's
Yeah.
fiction, but it's very true.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's nuts. But going back to the paper with Mickey Bendor, another really interesting thing that he brought up was that I never thought about either, was the fact, like what separates us, because one of like the biggest one of the biggest arguments you'll hear from vegans, it's so funny because this is not what this episode was going to be about at all,
I know,
but
right?
this is where we're starting right now. Another really interesting thing is like one of the biggest arguments you get from vegans is like, look at monkeys, look at gorillas, look how muscular they are, right? Look how muscular they are, like,
Oh,
and
from
they're
eating all
eating
these
plant food.
plants.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things that Mickey brings up is like, that is a prime example as to why we are not like monkeys and gorillas, because what you find is that like a huge sign that we were carnivores is because we're able to store fat on our body, because the fat would last for long periods of time, and so that's what gave us the opportunity to evolve and think and develop as beings, because we didn't have to eat food all the time, because we didn't have any fat on our body to store, right?
All
And
right.
the other,
Gorillas are always eating, right?
yeah, they're always eating,
Okay.
and they don't have a lick of fat on them. Most omnivores that lean towards plant food have to eat all the time, right? Because they're not developed to store fat on their bodies the way we are. And he also expressed that, like, it gave us the effort, like we could eat for 1 hour a day, right? What other animal can do that? What other animal can spend only 1 hour a day of eating, right? Except us. And because we eat for only an hour a day, it gave us time to develop tools, to develop fucking ideas, to build things, to build community, to connect with one another, to build tribes, like that. And also, that was the other thing that he mentioned. What you mentioned about the wolves is like the fact that we are tribal beings is another huge sign, because what other animals are tribal beings? Those who hunt. You know what I mean? Those who hunt, those who work together in unison and communicate together are tribal, are hunters, right? That why would we evolve to have that ability to communicate to one another if we didn't need to use it? You know what I mean? Because like pandas aren't fucking, coalescing and going after a target, right? They're just stripping bamboo off of the fucking tree and living their best lives. Versus us, we had to come together to hunt. And that's even what allowed us to hunt. Like the fact that we could store fat on our bodies for long extended periods of time allowed us the opportunity to go out and hunt. Another one was like our acidity. And this is what he pointed to when it came to being hyper carnivore. And I don't remember the exact numbers. If you listen to the episode, you'll hear it. But he said like our stomachs are so acidic, right? Our stomachs are such highly have so much acidity in them that allowed us to consume and digest these foods. And that's like why I laugh so hard. I like everyone's like the clean freakness of our world right now, because we don't understand how much we can actually handle. You know what I mean? Like there's this whole like thing. You've heard of high liver?
No.
So high liver is like this. I don't know if you'd call it a trend, but it's this whole thing where people will leave liver on their kitchen counter for a month and then eat it. Yeah, like people will leave like raw liver on their kitchen counter for a month and eat it, and it's high liver. And the point is because it's to train, like to keep that ability of our acidity going, just to show like, hey, you can fucking handle a lot more than you think you can. We were designed to do so. And not that I'm suggesting anyone go and do this, but it's just a point that proves that like our stomachs can handle a lot of shit. Another, and there were, like I said, there's like 10 points that he goes over, which I highly recommend you go and listen to. So that was, that really, and what I loved at the end of the podcast, what he said was like, and this is what really made me feel like I could do this, which is the way Mickey frames it is like, if we're looking at what is our safest bet when it comes to eating, right? Based on all the evidence, it leans towards a carnivore diet. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not telling anyone how they should eat or how they have to eat.
Right.
What I'm saying is like your safest bet is to be carnivore. That's the safest thing you can do.
Right.
For longevity, for health, for everything. So to me, the way I interpreted that was like, okay, if I just make carnivore most of my diet, right? If like 80-20 rule, 80% of how I'm eating is how our ancestors ate. Mm-hmm. Then that 20%, if I'm going out and enjoying myself, if I'm having, a little dinner with friends or whatever, if I want potatoes one evening, it's fine, right? Like, because he said that there is a ratio. There was some ratio of us eating seasonal plants.
Especially if you're closer to the equator.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. There was some foraging that went on. It's just the amount at which, like what amount of that actually existed. And so that really, kind of made it feel more accessible, because I had this like all or nothing mentality with it, which is like, I have to go carnivore, I have to just be carnivore. Right. And I was like, I don't want to fucking do that. And then the other part was the honey, because I knew Saladino started implementing honey into his diet. I remember him talking about it. But I wanted to understand like, what is that? Because to me, like I would assume most people would think like, oh, honey is just straight up sugar. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I was assuming that he was just having honey as a snack and not like making that a carb source. But actually, there's another podcast he put out where he breaks down a lot of the science around honey. Let me see if I can find it here. Yes, it's titled "Controversial Thoughts: Is Honey Really the Same as Sugar?" And that one blew my mind away as well, because it's not the same as sugar.
Fructose, right?
It's
just straight fructose. It doesn't have the glucose component to it or something like that.
I think you're right, but I don't fucking. But he says it in the episode.
Okay.
Actually, hold up, yo, I'm gonna be our own young Jamie right now.
Young Jamie. Shout out to Joe Rogan's main man. Fructose. But you're saying a lot of things and putting a lot into my mind and making me remember my 30 days of carnivore. That I did last February.
Yes, honey is fructose and glucose.
It's both.
Yes, honey It
that
contains
means
it contains 40% fructose, 30% glucose, and I think 10% of water, pollen, and minerals, including magnesium and potassium.
that's why it's so good to have before you go to bed at night. Like a nice little tablespoon. We learned that from, I'm forgetting her name. She was like episode 8, maybe. And she said to just have a tablespoon of honey. It's very Ayurvedic purposes. They use it before bed. I did it for a while and that stopped. I don't know why, but yeah, you want a good nice, you want to go bed to bed early. You know what I'm saying? You just have a tablespoon of honey and chill.
Well, I'll get into my experience with eating honey because I actually used to hate honey. Like,
Really?
I did not like. Yeah, I used to hate it growing up. Like anytime I got sick, my mom would be like, "Put honey in your tea."
In your tea?
I was like, I don't want that shit. But now that I understand the benefits of honey, of course, I'm like training my palate to enjoy it because I'm like, oh, all the goodness. So honey is really interesting, like because what Saladino did was he actually would measure his glucose,
The glucose monitor.
his insulin. He would measure his insulin, and his insulin would not spike from eating honey. It would not spike at all. I think he even said that it went down. Don't quote me on that, but I think he even said that it helped curb his insulin, because it doesn't. And this makes sense, right? It's like it's not the same thing. Like when you're looking at sugar that's manufactured and highly processed and fucking looks like cocaine, is not going to be the same thing. It's not going to be the same thing as this highly evolved process that's done by bees, and it's like this whole natural process that's created is not going to be the same thing as what you make in a factory, right?
Yo, the Hadza literally take chunks of wildflower honey and eat the honeycomb, which is
That's
insane.
Awesome.
It's insane.
That's awesome. Yeah, and so he talks about how from a nutritional standpoint, it does not have the same effect as sugar, which that was very intriguing for me at first, right? And then the second part was like another thing that I really liked about what he said was, which I never thought about, is nitric oxide. So apparently honey helps increase your nitric oxide.
Get out of here, really?
I was like, what? That's crazy. Yeah, it does.
It's good for the blood, baby.
It's good for the blood, and it gives you that like nice like vascularity. You know what I mean? Like, a little bit of both.
Oh, you know what I'm saying? I got long sleeves on, so you can't see in video, but Jesse got the guns out.
You know what I'm saying? A little bit of nitric oxide in your system, which, like, if you're a bro like I'm a bro, you're like, ooh, I could use some of that. You know what I'm saying? I could use a little bit of vascularity. Now I don't know how much actually happens, but it was just, it just.
I didn't know that. You just taught me something new. Shit.
Yo, Paul Saladino really knows his shit, man.
Yeah, he's a super nerd. So sometimes I'm like, but
I know.
he does have great.
I think he's getting better though. Like when I was listening to that podcast, because he only really started like coming on the scene maybe 2 years ago, right? As far as like a public figure. So I'm sure he's gotten that feedback before where he's like, hey, you fucking brainiac, you need to stop talking like we're in a science class, because we're all a bunch of morons and we need to know what you're saying to us.
I remember when I first ran across his content, I was just like, bro, I don't understand any of this. Like, I gotta like pause every other second to like Google something. Like, he's going over a paper. I'm just like, bro, like, I didn't go to school for this.
He gets into that mode where he's just like spitting shit, like he's and I'm like, yo, I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Much
but
love.
I feel
Shout
like,
out to Paul Saladino.
Much love, Saladino. But I feel like these last episodes that I listened to, he talks very like he talks very normal. Like he talks to the
he simplifies
normal. He simplifies it. And there's a lot of other benefits that he talks about, about honey and the way it works. And he said like he would eat. He wasn't being skimpy with the honey. He was eating legitimate amounts of honey. It was not affecting his insulin at all. But he says, he's like, of course, if you're diabetic, right? If you have high blood pressure, it's going to affect you because you're already highly sensitive, right? You're already highly sensitive. And so it's not going to operate the same way salt, like the same way salt won't operate the same way if you have high blood pressure, right? So being mindful of that, but I'm assuming most of the listeners are not dealing with, are not diabetics. So if you don't have that issue, it's fine. And then, so when I started experimenting, and honestly, another reason why I wanted to do it was like, outside of just having wanted to try this, outside of now listening to these 2 episodes and being strongly convinced that this is very likely the way we were supposed to eat, is even though I was eating just potatoes, when you get sensitive enough to your diet, you can feel certain shit. And I would feel that like potatoes weren't crushing me. They weren't like killing my stomach or anything like that. I wasn't getting like bloat, but I would get this sense of like somewhat of like glue or a rock inside of me. And the potatoes were delicious, so I didn't mind, but I just knew it wasn't like, this isn't the best it can be. You know what I mean? I just knew it wasn't the best.
Right.
And so I started experimenting. So right now, I'm eating meat nose to tail. I got fucking heart, liver, and kidney in my fridge, with a nice huge chuck roast and some salmon fillets. I got, the Mofo supplements from Ancestral Supplements, which has like, hold on, let me grab these real quick.
Yo, Ancestral Supplements, shout out
Ancestral, baby. It's got a couple things. So for those of you who don't know, these are desiccated organ meat, which pretty much means that they are grinded deep. What's it called? Grinded and
deep freeze, no?
Deep frozen,
dried frozen.
I was gonna say,
I know it's frozen, and then they cut it up and then they put it in little pills.
I was gonna say deep fried. I was like, these are definitely not deep fried.
Not deep fried. Nope.
These are not deep fried.
Far from it.
And Mofo stands for male optimization formula with organs, because I am a male and I like to optimize.
But they also have a female option for my ladies.
They also have a femme option. So this has testicle, prostate, heart, liver, and bone marrow. So I'm nose to tail 100%, and then I'll have honey, with my meals or like as a snack. And what I wanted to mention earlier was like what I've noticed with the honey is it's sweet, right? It's delicious, but I noticed that like I can't have a lot of it. You know what I mean? Like I'll have it and my craving will actually get satisfied. That's the most interesting thing. Like from a sweetness perspective, I noticed that like if I actually don't like to eat it with a spoon. I like to eat it with like a butter knife, and then just like have a sliver of it on the butter knife and just like lick it off. I know it's a weird like texture thing that I enjoy, because it's like this like,
it's like
nice,
peanut butter.
Yeah, it's like this like nice thin layer of honey that's just like, it's nice. I don't fucking,
and it's
don't
raw.
look at
It's
me
raw
strange.
honey, right? So
yeah,
it's not
raw,
like
organic.
Yep.
Wildflower honey. Yeah, that's the most important thing. Like, don't get your fucking artificially flavored bullshit.
Please don't. Yes.
No sugar. Just get real honey, and preferably local if you can get it. The reason you want it local is because if you have allergies, for example, or whatever, the microbiome of the honey is based on your environment. And so if you can get it that's local to you, you're actually priming your body for the environment you live in, which is really, really great. So I started doing that. It hasn't even been like, it's coming up on week 1, but it's manageable. You know what I mean? Which is really great. Like I think like the first or second day, I was kind of like, oh, like I want
potatoes.
I want potatoes, man. I like my potatoes. But then I kind of got over it.
It goes really quick. Like when I did the 30-day carnivore challenge, it was the weirdest effect was after 2 weeks, just not just not wanting anything. Like I
Yeah.
just felt my cravings all went away. Like the cravings for, you'll get occasional craving for like a cookie, I don't know, or
Mm-hmm.
pizza or something because your
Yeah.
body is so like primed for it, right? But
Mm-hmm.
once you start doing this, your body is just like, I don't need that shit. I get all my nutrients. I remember never being hungry. Like I would just eat
Mm.
because I know I'm working out and I need the
Yeah.
protein and whatnot. But like I just never felt hungry, man. Like I
Mm.
never felt hungry. After a steak, I
Yeah.
was like, I'm good. I have one steak and maybe two eggs, and I was good. You know?
Yeah, that's actually something I forgot to mention. Another thing that would happen with potatoes that made me question it as well
Mm,
was that so the way I would eat my food is I would eat the meat and then I would eat the potatoes. And then like without a doubt, I would not feel satisfied. Like I
mm,
would eat the potatoes and then I would want like something sweet. I would want like either like a chocolate protein shake or chocolate and like just a piece of chocolate or some. I wanted a snack, I always would
word.
crave a snack after that meal. And that also made me question like, oh, why am I not being fulfilled? And part of it I thought could be just habit, like the fact that I always would just have a chocolate protein shake after my meal. But
Okay.
then another part of me was like, or is there something going on here that in these potatoes is making me crave more carbohydrates, more sweetness. Um, and so now, and what's cool is like, I'll have meat, I'll have the honey, and I'm good. I'm good. I'm not craving afterwards. So we will see. We will see what this next month will look like, next few months. I mean, I'm expecting to get shredded AF.
Yeah, that's what happened
Shredded,
to me too when I was carnivore. I got shredded AF in no time
shredded.
too.
But you didn't have any honey, right? You were just eating.
No, I was my meals consisted of a mix of organ meat.
Hmm.
That's the first time I bought ancestral supplements. I bought the same things, Mofos.
Yeah,
I
boy.
bought I bought a bunch of ribeye steaks and a bunch of ground beef with about 20% fat. All of this was mostly from Butcher Box. So grass fed, grass finished, clean meat.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I would eat maybe like 2 pounds of meat a day. I know a lot of people
Yeah.
are probably gonna be like, "What the fuck?" It's
What?
like that's the only thing I'm eating. So take that.
Hmm.
With obviously real salt, like
Yeah.
Redmond sea salt, and yeah, man, it was pretty decent. For me, it got a little boring after a while, but
Sure.
if you're smart enough, you can figure out. Like people have figured out ways to make like cheese and meat pancakes. Like
Hmm.
there's a lot of stuff out there that people have become pretty good at with the because I'm in like 3 carnivore groups on Facebook.
Hmm.
So what I was gonna mention earlier, like it's great to look at the science side of things, right? Like it gives you that perspective and you can see like, oh, historically this is what we've done. The science shows that actually cholesterol doesn't come from, eating
Hmm.
a high fat diet. But when you see these success stories of some
Hmm.
crazy success stories on these anecdotal success stories, you're just like, wow, like this really does something for people. Whether that's removing like skin issues that people have,
Hmm.
bloating issues that people had, like digestion issues people had. Obviously the weight loss you get, like I've seen crazy pictures of people going from 400 pounds to like 185 and looking amazing. People getting rid of, when if a very relatively fat person does a diet, you know how they get flabby after? Like they
Hmm.
get skinny, but they have the flab.
Yeah.
Apparently, with the carnivore diet, you actually your skin tightens up. So like
Mm.
you lose weight, you don't lose it with the skin. Based on like once again anecdotal evidence, I don't
Well,
know.
I can attest to that in the fact
Mm,
that like what I noticed, not even being full carnivore, just moving towards, it's not just me who's noticed. Like I've gotten this feedback before too, of people who's like known me for a while,
right.
who've said that like my skin looks very like tight now,
Yep.
uh, and I would attest that to eating this way, to eating more like the more and more animal meat I've geared towards in my diet. I've definitely gotten that feedback, and I've just noticed that my skin is like way more like supple and tight, So
Exactly. And
yeah,
strong, like you feel.
yeah, yeah.
The only thing I experienced, and not everyone gets this experience because I asked in the group when I was going through it, and people were like, no, I'm good, is that my face had gotten really, really oily at times. I was constantly cleaning my face throughout the day. Like when I would be at work, I just like go like this. And for those, I would just like wipe my brow and just like, oh, why is it so oily? I'm gonna go to the bathroom and like wash off my face. But that was like the biggest thing. But
that was
other than,
probably detox. That's
yeah.
probably your skin was probably detoxing
Oh, I didn't think
because
of that. No one
you
said that.
only had a month, right? You only
I only
did
get
it.
a
So
month, yeah.
so your body was probably detoxing. Your pores were detoxing. That's what that sounds like to me.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had a sauna during that time to just like pop into a sauna. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Have a stick of beef liver or beef liver. Beef liver. I know you can find it online now. You can find like beef liver jerky now. Out
Yeah,
there.
carnivore really is
Yeah, has
sells
a
them, right?
yeah. So like, but I know that like the most amazing part, I mean, for me, is something I always say, and I'm gonna share some stuff with the group. Don't get disgusted, folks, but it's just something that we humans go through, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people go through. And Karina has had to deal with my partner in crime had to deal with this, since we've been together, was just my gassiness was always like a huge, huge issue, bro. Like really big issue. They say you should fart anywhere from 1 to 3 times a day, which is normal. Nah, bro, it's like double digits up in there, like my whole life, and obviously I've had digestion issues with going to the bathroom, like maybe not going one day, constipation, like all these things. And then when I went carnivore, I was kind of scared because I was like, oh, like meat makes you constipated. That's what I was told growing up. And that it was the complete opposite. Like my bloated gasness completely stopped. Like if I mean, they have that, there's a notion if you first go carnivore but you're going from a sad diet, standard American diet, to like carnivore diet, you tend to get the runs, like don't trust the fart. That's like rule number one of like carnivore. But I didn't go through that. I don't know if it was because I came predominantly from like a keto paleo based diet. And bro, just like, I don't know, I was going every day, same time, without coffee, just hydrating relatively more often than usual. Make sure I'm taking my electrolyte supplements, and just going regularly. And it was not like a mess. Like the bathroom didn't look like a mess. It was just like it was just one whole one, and then I was done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't mean to like get a little like granular there with the details, but I think it's important for folks to know, like, obviously please do this with some supervision. We're just crazy people that don't do it with supervision.
No, we're not crazy, man. We study this shit constantly.
Yeah.
We've earned the right to do it as we please because we know what the fuck we're doing.
Yeah, it took me like 2 months of studying and really digging into the research and seeing like historical people like me who have done it. I look for like Latinos because I'm like, oh, we have the same kind of blood. And I've seen those. And I was just like, okay, they have their success stories. This is what I'm hearing. And then I listened to a mad podcast. That's when I first stumbled upon Paul Saladino. And I was just like, all right, let's take a stab at this. And luckily the group was there. So anytime I had questions with any issues, I would just go to them, so you got to find a decent person, at least do it with somebody. I think.
I mean, hey, you can hit me up, let's do it together. I'm out here doing the meat and honey diet. I like that more than carnivore, the meat and honey diet. I'm fucking Winnie the Pooh in this bitch. You know what I
mean? Winnie the Pooh was a bear, so
Winnie the Pooh in it. So yeah, man, what a rabbit hole we did not expect to go down.
I know, right? That's what happens when you talk about nutrition for quite a while.
How long have we been on so far?
A little over an hour now, I think.
You want to take you want to take a break here? We'll come back on, shoot part 2.
Yes, sir. For those folks that don't know, we're gonna do a few parts this week. So this is just part 1, which will be released at our typical time, which is Monday mornings. But we're gonna have a part 2 discussing something that Jesse is doing. I'm not gonna say it right now, but Jesse's doing something big.
And so now I have to take back. Well, no, we'll expand what the title was going to be, because now this is going to be a multiple part episode. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for fucking tuning in.
Yeah.
We're gonna go take a fucking break. I don't know why I'm saying fucking so much, but we're gonna go take take a break, and then we will be back with part 2, where I will be sharing some very interesting activity that I'm choosing to partake in, or not partake in.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Uh,
Oh yeah. So be ready for part 2, folks. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share this podcast with someone who might, get a lot of information, or at least this information will help them, based on like the experience that Jesse's going through with trying the meat and honey diet. Let's not call it the carnivore diet. Meat and honey diet. So, and we'll keep y'all all posted. Thank you for staying with us this long, folks. Until the next episode in a few days.
Yes. Stay
Dun, dun,
tuned.
dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
All right, y'all. Peace.
Peace.